Friday nights and play under the milk bottle, which had a light in it, and that's the only light we had to play at midnight on Friday night for a couple of hours, and you got away with a lot when you're playing under the light of a milk bottle, that's for sure. But anyway, the all through school, I had the opportunity to be a rink rat in Sydney, the old Sydney Forum, which is, of course, as you know, has been replaced by Centre 200. But in the old Sydney Forum, it was a historic building because it housed something like 2,000 seats, maybe. And at senior hockey games, the Maritime Senior League, there'd be 5,000 in the building. Now, I don't know where the fire marshals were in those days, but...
Order, please.
Yeah.
I would wonder if the honourable member would adjourn debate.
Yes, I'll adjourn debate. Oh, the hour has approached. Yes, I'll adjourn debate. Okay.
Good. We have arrived at the moment for today's emergency debate, and that was approved earlier by the House. The debate is to discuss the crisis facing the lobster industry in Nova Scotia and how it will affect the economy of our province. The Honourable, the member for Digby-Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the House for accepting this debate. I would like to say that I'm pleased to stand in my place here today and speak on this crisis, but I'm not. And as I was last spring, I stood in this House and I predicted the bubble was going to burst, Mr. Speaker. When you see the price of oil double within 1 year, I knew last spring the bubble was going to burst, and the bubble has burst. And the worst of a burst bubble is you have to let it go completely flat before you can try to patch it and blow it back up. So, and that's what's happening in our fishery, Mr. Speaker. Right now, if you give fishermen their fuel for free, they probably won't be able to go fishing this winter. And Mr. Speaker, I started fishing, my family started fishing 15 generations ago in this province. No, 14 generations ago. My grandchildren, if they make it, will be 15. I was 13th generation, and my sons are 14th generation. 1637, Jean Thériault came here from France. And he started probably the first day he landed on these beaches to live off the beach and live off the sea. I started myself 12 years old in the lobster fishery. I'd come home after school, I'd have an hour and I'd go take my little rowboat and shove it off in the winter time in December and go catch my lobsters every night. That's when I started. I want to tell you how the licensing started too in this fishery. You didn't need a license when I was 12 years old. If you wanted to go fishing, you went fishing. No such thing as a lobster license or a fishing license. One day I was walking up the wharf just before Christmas, and I had my bucket of lobsters. I always caught enough in the winter to buy my 8 brothers and sisters something for Christmas. That's what I'd done it for. I was 12 years old, 13 years old. I was walking up the wharf one night with my bucket of lobsters, and Herbie Cossaboom, the only fishery officer that we had in Digby County, I met him on the wharf. And he looked at me. He said, "Junior, have you got a lobster license?" I said, "No, Herbie, I don't." Well, he says, "You've got to have one." I said, "You got to?" "Yeah." He said, "New law now, you all got to have lobster license." So he sat down, Mr. Speaker. He wrote out a little pink slip like this. And he handed it to me. He says, "That's 25 cents, Junior." I says, "Herbie, I haven't got 25 cents. So he patted me on the back and said, "Merry Christmas." That's where my license came from, Mr. Speaker. So it wasn't long after that, we seen more fishery officers coming into the fishery, more and more and more as more licensing get out. Because it was about control, I guess. I mean, we controlled it for 14 generations, but somehow DFO thought they could control it better. We controlled it pretty well, I would say. We had one of the best fisheries, still is one of the best fisheries today in this world. In the early 70s, after everything was licensed, the catch did go down some. So they decided they decided to take a buyout, just too many at it, so they done a buyout of the lobster fishery. Romeo LeBlanc was involved in that. And it was good because after the buyout, the fishery started growing. And it grew and it grew and it grew. And because we had good conservation measures in it, we threw our small ones back. We always threw the buried ones back. We even come up to where we notch the females now and throw them back. And they produce and produce. And there's the best kind of lobster fishery in Atlantic Canada. And it seems to be growing more in other areas. But in LFA 34, which is Southwest Nova Scotia, where I'm from, it's an exceptional fishery. Very dependent upon, you know, and people look for it for their whole year's work out of that season. They do. But in 1999, there was a Supreme Court decision came down. And the Supreme Court decision had to be satisfied. And it was, everyone knows, it was about getting First Nations into the fishery. And we agreed. They want to go fishing, they can go fishing. So DFO, in their wisdom, figured out a way to get them in. They would buy them in. They would buy First Nations into the fishery. Well, in 2000, you had a rig, you could buy a nice lobster rig for $200,000, $250,000, I would say, around that. And it wasn't long, it wasn't 3 or 4 years. These licenses and rigs got up to $1 million because DFO was paying anything they could, didn't care, to get that court order satisfied. That was their wisdom to do that, and under their management wisdom. So we had our young fellas, $1 million for a rig, which the federal government was paying for these licenses. So then you had our young fellas coming along. Our young fellas coming along wanted to get into the fishery. Well, Dad, how am I going to get into the fishery? Well, you got to buy into it. So they started. And 3 or 4 years after this, our younger children started coming into the fishery, going and doing every mortgage and everything we had to get these guys into the fishery. What else could we do? We just couldn't leave them out, so we had to pay the price the DFO set to get the licenses for First Nations. Right. I mean, right now, when them licenses were bought, Mr. Speaker, they was bought on a $6 and $7 lobster, pound lobster. That's what the banks looked at. That's what all the financial institutes looked at. So, boys, you're catching your 40 or 50,000 pound a year. It's $6. It'll give you pretty good stock. We'll take half of that for the boat. The other half will go for the crew. Because I know of 3 fellers down there that the last 3 years have been living off nothing but love. But they've been paying their payments. They've been paying their payments at $6 a pound. So here they are, and there's about 200, I'll talk about LFA 34 because that's where I'm from. There's probably 200 in that fleet with payments from 500 to 1.2 million probably. That's what's going on there today in that fleet of debt. The Mr. Speaker, yesterday there was a meeting in Yarmouth. And this meeting was there was people, there was buyers from Maine, there was buyers from Nova Scotia there, and things didn't sound too rosy. Maine says the pounds are full in the United States. They've had good lobster in the American shore. They don't believe, they may not even be able to take any lobsters. They've filled their pound down there on the American shore with $2.50 lobsters. That's what they've done. So really, they don't want any more lobsters, but they may be able to help out to buy a few somehow. And we don't know the price. They talk $2.50 they paid for what they got. So, you know, they could be talking $2 a pound for these lobsters. And here you have these businesses down there that borrowed all this debt on a $6 lobster. The market is down 50%, 50% to what it was last year, Mr. Speaker. That was said by our buyers. That was said by the American buyers. The canners, the processors, they may be looking at 1/3 of what they needed last year, 1/3 of the amount of lobsters. And last year they paid $4 and $5 for them, the canneries. So if they only need 1/3 this year, and they don't really need that 1/3, but they're talking they might be able to take up to that 1/3. You know, so, and then we have the banks down there, and the financial institutes, where buyers, a lot of them smaller buyers, go and they have a line of credit. They can go to the bank and get their $2, $3, $4, $5 million, whatever they need that first week, to pay the fishermen for the lobsters. Well, the financial institutes are taking a second look at this. That's what's going on. They're taking a second look to see if that's secure enough to put this money out to buy any lobsters at all. So industry, last night, I talked to a lot of fishermen last night, stayed up most of the night talking to them on the telephone, including my sons, my brother, who's an executive on LFA 34, plus other executive. And the industry's looking at ways to reduce the effort somehow. They're looking at reducing days fishing. They're looking at shutting Sundays down. They're looking at fishing till the 1st of January, shutting down. And they're looking at shutting down, period, till next April. That's how bad and gloomy things are. I said I hated to stand here in my place today and speak this, because there's young fellas down there tonight that are not sleeping half as good as I did last night, and I never slept much. The LFA Executive 34 today is going to ask the financial institutes in Southwest Nova if they'll help the fishermen out by deferring their loans and even deferring their interest payments till we can get through this mess. The industry's going to need time to get through this mess, and I'm sure in the next year or two things are going to get better. But there's ways, Mr. Speaker, that the federal government can help. You know, can the federal government give back these fishermen their $1,890 they had to just pay for a license fee for that one Herbie give me? $1,890 they have to pay out to have access to that for the season. But, you know, that'd buy a lot of food for them. The EI program, the federal government could look at that somehow to help them. Now, I'd also like to say the province may be able to help. I tabled a bill in this House the other day about workers' compensation. They want nearly 10%, 8%, talking 10%, of a fisherman's wages to insure him while he's aboard that boat. 10% workers' comp. They're not going to be able to do it, Mr. Speaker. And that's something that this province can look at to help these people. The lobster fishing in Nova Scotia has been a success story, one of the best fisheries. And it's just, we're going to go through hard times right now. And Mr. Speaker, there's a saying that goes, never allow a crisis to go to waste. I think if we all work together, if governments all work together, with the fishermen, with the buyers, with the financial institutions, I believe we can come up with an answer to this problem. Because for every problem, there's a solution. There always was and always will be. There's been solutions through the fishery for 15 generations that my family knows about. But I think this one here is one of the biggest one and worst ones that we've ever run up against because of the debt, the massive debt that the Department of Fisheries and Oceans of this country helped create. So surely, God, we can help create a solution for it. And I hope the DFO in Ottawa is listening today. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I'll take my seat, and I thank you very much.
Thank you. The Honourable, the Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I too, as well as the member from Digby Annapolis, have some really grave concerns about the upcoming fishing season in Southwest Nova and LFA 34, as well as the Premier and the rest of our government have those same concerns. And Mr. Speaker, we know that the lobster fishery in the province of Nova Scotia is one of the most lucrative in the country. As I've mentioned, I've talked about before in this House, the lobster industry to the province of Nova Scotia is valued at about $400 million to $450 million to the economy of the province. So, Mr. Speaker, we all know that it's a very, very important economic generator for Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, I guess, the lobster fishery over the last, my lifetime, and I turned 60 not too long ago, so, Mr. Speaker, the lobster fishery has been a very, very, very important part of my life. I'm growing up down in Heatherton and Bayfield. My grandmother lived in Bayfield, Antigonish County, and Mr. Speaker, I used to stay down there, and I went to school in Bayfield for a few years, and my goal, I guess, on Saturday mornings, I was at the wharf at 3 o'clock in the morning to see what boat I could get on to go lobster fishing with some of the guys there. And I know the member from Halifax Needham understands. Her being her home port, I guess, was Frankville and Harbour Bushy, which was another very important lobster fishing community, and still is. So, Mr. Speaker, the lobster fishery is very important. I still go to Bayfield every chance I get. Spend an evening in the camper and get out on the boat to lobster fish when the opportunity arises. But, Mr. Speaker, I guess as we all know, I mean, the downturn in the economy worldwide, is causing the problem that we have today. We do know, last year one of the major problems that we had in the lobster fishery was the value of the Canadian dollar hurt the lobster fishery. A dollar that's on par with the U.S. dollar is not good for our export sales. As well, Mr. Speaker, we had the high cost of fuel last year was another one, which again this year has dropped and is not as bad as it was last year. But, Mr. Speaker, as we've been saying, and the member from Digby Annapolis has indicated, we all know that the consumer in the U.S., where our biggest market is, probably 75% of our exports go to the U.S., and we've depended on that market for a lot of years. Ever since I can remember, the U.S. market was our biggest market for our lobster fishery. And, Mr. Speaker, I guess, we have to do things a little bit different than we have been. We feel that there's a major market that we haven't tapped in, and that's probably our Canadian market. And so, Mr. Speaker, I would like to take a few minutes today and talk about our marketing initiatives that we're taking part in. Just this fall, we'll be starting very soon. So, we know that like I said, we know the commercial fishery drives the economy of our coastal communities, and the lobsters are economic engine. And as I've also said, the lobster industry has faced a number of challenges over the past few years. And, Mr. Speaker, on Wednesday of this week, the fishermen in Southwest Nova met to discuss the coming season and the issues. And as the minister said, there was a number of things discussed at that meeting that tried to maybe take some of the pressure off the lobster. But, Mr. Speaker, we still know that there is going to be pressures. There are concerns with pricing as we head into our important fall season that opens next week. And given the uncertainties in the lobster markets in the United States, staff are looking at a number of marketing opportunities for our lobster products. Mr. Speaker, we are working to expand our markets in Canada, Europe, and Asia. And, Mr. Speaker, staff in our marketing division are working very hard on a marketing campaign for lobster to be launched early in December called the Discover Nova Scotia Lobster Camp. While we are always looking at ways to assist the industry, with ways they can get their products out there and have consumers be aware of the great Nova Scotia seafood available to them. This campaign is being done to mitigate some of the potential losses that may be felt by lobster fishermen in our province due to the low prices in the marketplace right now. The lobster fisheries, Mr. Speaker, is too important to this province for us to ignore the impact that these lower prices may have on the fisheries overall, which is why we are working so quickly to get some things in place. And Mr. Speaker, I'd like to take a moment to outline to you what this promotion is all about. Mr. Speaker, we are looking at ways to market the message of the unique experience of eating Nova Scotia's luxurious product, lobster. Now, if you haven't eaten a Nova Scotia lobster lately, I encourage you to do so as soon as possible. And Mr. Speaker, if you know where we can get some, I'll go with you. And as a matter of fact, Mr. Speaker, I encourage you to pick some up this weekend and share them with your family and your friends and me. Nova Scotia lobster, Mr. Speaker, is some of the best and the tastiest lobsters you can find anywhere. Now, most of us in here are used to eating lobster in a particular way, and while tradition is good, we are also looking at ways to promote our lobster in unique ways that perhaps people haven't thought about before. Mr. Speaker, it is important to educate people about how to cook, prepare, and serve lobster in many new and different ways. Now, Mr. Speaker, from a business planning perspective, we are looking at education of consumers to create positive awareness, excitement, and demand for Nova Scotia lobsters. This campaign will work to increase the perception and the brand of Nova Scotia lobster, educate what makes Nova Scotia lobsters unique, stimulate consumer interest in seeking and purchasing lobster, both at stores and in restaurants, and Mr. Speaker, and supports our seafood industry. So the campaign thrust is focused on the current situation, but it also has more long-term goals. We want to show people that lobster is a versatile product that can be prepared, eaten, and enjoyed in many ways. Mr. Speaker, let me describe to you and our audience who we are reaching out to. We want to strengthen the existing consumer market, but also reach out to those who may be unaware or shy on how to even handle or cook with lobster. There are existing consumers, those people who buy lobster on a regular basis. Those people need to be given new ways to prepare and serve this great product. As well, Mr. Speaker, there are new consumers, the ones, as I mentioned, who have never handled or cooked a lobster before. Then, Mr. Speaker, there are our expats living and working in Western Canada. Those consumers may not be aware that you can buy Nova Scotia lobster all year round, and the taste of Nova Scotia, taste of home, so to speak, is available all year round. Like I said earlier, Mr. Speaker, my staff in the marketing division are working very hard to line up this marketing strategy in time for the Christmas season. They are also, Mr. Speaker, busy that things are happening that fast. They need to happen fast. The marketing staff presented some of those ideas to industry during the annual ministers' conference last week, and the industry, Mr. Speaker, were very impressed with the amount of work this division is engaged in and how quickly they are responding to the need for more and better marketing. Mr. Speaker, let me outline to you some of the ways we are looking at reaching that market. First, Mr. Speaker, we are planning a media blitz, advertising on radio, TV, in all 4 provinces. Specifically, an ad in the popular food magazine Flavors. This magazine ad will reach 190,000 households in 4 provinces, including Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and British Columbia. And Mr. Speaker, I'll table a copy of that promotion that will be in that magazine, as well as on TV and other advertising. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, we are planning a culinary tour in various places in Alberta, for example, Lloydminster, Fort McMurray, Edmonton, and Calgary, that will include chefs and other point-of-sale materials. And finally, in terms of marketing, we are working on launching a website that will include everything lobster, things like recipes, handling, storage, and preparation, serving suggestions, and other consumer information that will educate people about our lobster. Mr. Speaker, we are looking at ways to assess the outcome of our campaign. We will be measuring sale results of Western retailers carrying Nova Scotia lobster, speaking with Nova Scotia suppliers to determine the impact on orders and sales. And we plan to continue to carry this message into 2009 during the early months, highlighting Valentine's Day, Easter, in the same and possible additional locations. We will maintain our current collaborative relationship with the industry and work to establish new ones with best West Coast buyers from results of this campaign. Mr. Speaker, I want to make it clear that we realize this is a very challenging and potentially difficult time for our lobster fishery in Nova Scotia. Before we made any decisions, we communicated directly to the industry, asking them who and what cities they are currently active in with this, and is what shaped our decision to target the consumers directly instead of the food service industry. We realize that this pilot project, although we want to apply the same theory to other markets for our products in the seafood and the agri-food sectors. And as I mentioned earlier, Mr. Speaker, all this information on the campaign and even more will be available December 1st on the website that we are developing. The launch of this website will be made available to the people of Nova Scotia by my very capable communication staff once it is ready to go. And Mr. Speaker, I would have to say in response to the honourable member from Digby Annapolis as well, when he spoke about the hardships of some of our young fishermen that are tied down with big loans required for boats and quota. And Mr. Speaker, one of the reasons we did in our last budget come up with the Loans for Licenses program, which I believe is one of the best programs that has happened in the Department of Fisheries since 1936, when the boat loans were first initiated. And I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, our staff and our loan board work with the fishermen. They work with the guys with the boat loans. If they're having some difficult times, they can defer loan payments and they can defer interest, that sort of thing. Mr. Speaker, we certainly realize the hardships are there, but we will do anything in our power. We will work with the federal government as well. I do have a letter to the federal minister asking her for a meeting as soon as possible. You have to realize that the minister is only new. She's only in the position roughly 3 weeks to a month. The House of Commons is now just sitting for the first, I think yesterday it opened. And the new Minister of Fisheries, I can assure you, is very busy, but she has indicated to us that she's willing to talk and willing to try to help the fishermen in the situation that they may find themselves in. And on behalf of our government, on behalf of our loan board, which I do know will make every effort to work with the fishermen that have loans to try to accommodate whatever need may be there. And Mr. Speaker, our Loans for Licenses program, I will have to tell the House again that we are on target to be able to be accepting applications by the 1st of January for licenses, quotas, and by the 1st of April, Mr. Speaker, it is our expectation that we will be putting loans out the door. But like I said, we are here to work with the industry. I know at our ministers' conference last week that the industry was very receptive to the program that we brought forward on the marketing plans that we have for lobster. And Mr. Speaker, in the lobster industry, if we don't start doing things a little bit different in our marketing, we depend too much on the U.S. market. And another issue, Mr. Speaker, too, I guess I should mention, is the Japanese market that we have, and the concern we have there with the PSP in Tamalian lobsters, which is a very big concern for the Japanese market. Mr. Speaker, they take approximately about 8% of the export sales from Nova Scotia to Japan. 2 weeks ago, I met with the Japanese ambassador to Canada, brought that very issue up, Once we explained, my staff was with me, Assistant Deputy Minister Greg Roach, and once we explained what we are doing to inspect and make sure that we have a very safe product on the market, he told us that he would refer that back to his country to. So thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity.
Pleasure, and I noticed the remarks of a member from Digby that he was reluctant to talk about this difficult topic. And I think, you know, I have the opportunity here tonight to speak to on this emergency debate regarding the emergency crisis that we are about to face in the lobster fisheries. And I just want to point out to the Mr. Speaker that I'm used to difficult times, and I think the member from Digby will confirm this, that we both sat on the advisory board in the early 80s and mid-90s, and we faced difficult times during 1983 with the Pumlico affair, and I'll leave that for another date for discussion. Also, in 1999, myself and the member from Digby dealt with an issue regarding the Marshall decision. So we are faced with some difficult times in this industry, and I look forward to having this debate here tonight. I noted the ministers, I'm going to get away from my prepared text here, but the minister just spoke about the possibility of having a meeting with the federal minister on this issue, and I suggest to all members here tonight, we need to warm up the plane and get that meeting starting immediately. Mr. Speaker, last Sunday, a few days ago, there was an emergency meeting in Widgeport, Nova Scotia. And fishermen around this province, from District 33 to District 34, compiled there in a very inclement weather. And it was not difficulty to find the new fire hall in Widgeport because it was surrounded by trucks, and it was evident where the meeting was held. It was packed, 300 or 400 people there. And they all had one thing in common, is that they understood that the trouble was ahead of them. And there are some difficult troubles or economic waters, and I don't want to say that this is a perfect storm, but the potential there is for some difficult waters that is facing this industry. And I just want to point out that in the most recent days, this government has a wait and see approach. And Mr. Speaker, I love to table two documents basically confirming that. And what we've seen to our, I guess our industry to the south, in the last 3 weeks, we've seen the governor of Maine suggest that they appoint a task force to deal with the economic crisis that is facing the lobster industry. And what is our federal government doing on this? And again, I pointed out earlier last week, we've heard silence from our MPs in Nova Scotia, and the silence is deafening. But I quickly will point out, and members will suggest, that we have a similar situation dealing with the auto industry in central Canada and the United States. And I believe the jets are being warmed up. They're meeting as we speak. It's become a part of our election. We've seen it in the U.S. Most recently in their campaign, that basically put their election on hold and dealt with the economic crisis. We have a Canadian government that's dealing with the auto bailout, and I'm not suggesting a bailout. What I'm suggesting is fishermen are requesting a hand up, not a handout. And I think that's the important topic here. The fishing industry met just as of yesterday, Mr. Speaker. There was two issues that they brought forward for recommendations and for endorsement from politicians around Nova Scotia. And one was to DFO. They suggested that they would take some responsibility, and the economic marketing glut that creates in our lobster industry in the very first few weeks, they made a decision that they would stay home each and every Sunday. This is District 34 now, I want to be very clear. Each and every Sunday for the entire season of a 6-month season. I just want to point out that District 33, all conditions, the status quo is the same. There was one other suggestion, is that the fishermen suggested that the industry promote that we have a deferral program to dealing with the heavy payments that fishermen have faced in the upcoming season because of the low prices, that they felt this is crucial for this particular industry to get through the next few months, the next years. And I was listening with great interest to the minister speak earlier, and I didn't hear any of that message in there. And I think that's something that we all have to take in consideration here, have the debate, and I think that should be a package when we go to meet our federal minister. Again, I want to point out that I think the industry of Nova Scotia, the lobster industry, will be insulted. In fact, it's a slap in the face by this government to say that it has a wait-and-see approach, and I tabled the 2 documents earlier. Mr. Speaker, if I am successful and have a long life in political life, or I've been here for 2.5 years, if there's one point that I want to make, it wants to be made in the next minute. The fishing industry has an unwritten rule that when someone is in distress or needs assistance, the signal goes up. The first person on the scene offers assistance. That rule, and I think the member from Digby will confirm that rule has been in existence for generations. And there's a side note to this. If you visualize a boat being in distress and just sitting there stalled in the water, the people who may pass by will be taken to task for this. The one who will offer assistance does not, I repeat, does not take a wait-and-see attitude or approach. That's the point that I want to make. If I have been successful the next 10 years, that's the one clear message that we have to make. We do not pass by an industry that's asking for assistance. The meeting was in Widgeport. They met yesterday with the respective buyers from the United States, in Canada, and Nova Scotia, and the industry is saying the signal went up, we need assistance. And they will recall of the attitudes of a wait-and-see approach. You do not leave somebody on the verge of going ashore on a stormy night. You don't do that. And what fishermen have always done, and where I was taught, is you prepare for the worst and you simply hope for the best. And I think a lot of us are prepared for the uncertainty of the economic market conditions that are being faced in the next 6 months. Fishermen are very successful of observing and reading the weather conditions. And every single person that was in that meeting Sunday, every fisherman representative, every buyer that was in the meeting yesterday understands the market conditions that we are faced in the next several months. That's a given. And what we see each year, because of the efficiency of our fishing industry in southwest Nova Scotia, the marketplace, there's a creation of a bottleneck in that marketplace. The fishermen have attempted to address that. They have taken each and every Sunday off of the upcoming season for District 34. They have a simple request. We know that there's going to be some rough waters ahead. We know that if we have a strong boat and the economic engine, that we can get through this storm that we're about to face. They want a simple solution, and I hope the minister will address this. They want assurances that we'll have a program in place to defer these loans and we can get through this crisis. And there's a number of them what we can do, Mr. Speaker. As we look across Nova Scotia, we're faced with an opportunity to export our product to our European friends. And there's a large question as we face the Christmas market, will there be air cargo space for these particular lobsters? That shouldn't be a question. That never should be a question. I think the first thing we can do, this is a multi-million-dollar industry. I think we could go out and create a working group and we can have that problem addressed. We shouldn't be wondering when it comes 10 days before the Christmas market if we got cargo space. And again, the economic engine that drives the rural communities across Nova Scotia is the lobster industry. We watched our federal government when the Marshall decision was implemented. They responded by giving millions of dollars to that particular situation. They simply went out and bought licenses, and they tried to address a Supreme Court decision. We're not asking for money or bailout. We're simply asking for a hand up. And, there's a number of questions that a working group can be done, and I alluded earlier that each time we had a crisis in this fisheries, there was a working group that was formed, and they addressed it, and they come up with some great recommendations. And that's another point that I'm strongly recommending, is that we form a working group. We can have members from the industry. We can have political members from all parties, and we can have some great recommendations. For instance, the opportunity for lobster buyers who takes a lot of this inventory and they can just store it for several months. They need access to capital. And we're talking major money here, right? So this situation can change in the next 3 weeks. And if they don't have opportunity for that inventory or to buy that inventory that can be sold in March or February, there's a problem. And it never should be. The other topic is access to markets. And I believe that there is some markets that needs to be tapped around the world that we're not simply doing as we speak. The point that I'm trying to make here is that our industry is vital to rural Nova Scotia. And we see something that's happening once in probably 20 years. I think the last time I recall the price was below $3 was something like 18 or 20 years ago. It's a fluke. I think we have an economic crisis that's amongst us. It's evident. The G20 members have met. The emphasis is going to be on the economy. So I believe that we can see a future. We can ride out the storm. But we need some assistance. And I'm going to ask the minister again that we warm the airplane up. I'm not talking in weeks or months. We need to go to Ottawa now. We need to take that message. We want to defer these loans. We want to have access to capital. We want a place for these lobsters to go. And we want to know that we have the backing of this government. And I encourage the members to thoroughly debate this here tonight, and we can make a difference. And I thank you for the time. Thank you very much. I look forward to hearing the other members' remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. The Honourable, the member for Richmond.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and it's both a pleasure and it's unfortunate to have to rise to speak on this emergency debate here tonight, and I want to commend my colleague from Digby, Annapolis, who, Speaker, I think it's safe to say since 2005 has been the voice of the fishing industry here in this House, both in his career as a fisherman and the passion that he's brought to the floor of this House each and every time that he has spoken about this industry, and for him to bring forward this emergency debate about the lobster industry touches to the very core of his being and the core of his family history and the core of his own children who continue in that industry. And Mr. Speaker, I've had the privilege of growing up in a fishing family, and mind you, our family was more involved in the ground fish because my dad did get out of the lobster fishery in the early 1980s when the federal government was threatening to cancel licenses that weren't being used. And I remember he fondly, or not so fondly, tells how much he sold the license for, which was a couple of $1,000s, which today is probably worth $500,000. So needless to say, they were different times, and we're in different circumstances now. But in Richmond County, Mr. Speaker, as in so many other communities around the province, in lobster fishing area 29, 30, and 31, which all touch Richmond, the lobster fishery plays a major role in our economy. And just working out some of the rough numbers that I was given today, it's well over $10 million was the value of the landings this summer in 2008 in Richmond County. Now, $10 million is a lot of money. And I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, that it wasn't always the case in Richmond County, because one just has to go 10 years ago and to see that the landings were 80% less than what they are today. So we've been fortunate in the sense that what I believe, as the Mayor from Digby-Annapolis has said, some good management practices by our local fishermen, and maybe with a little bit of luck from Mother Nature, the catches have gone up quite a bit, and it's been a very lucrative fishery. We have approximately over 100 vessels fishing out of Richmond County. They average a crew of 3 to 4 members. And Mr. Speaker, there's also been a strong number of women who are now part of the lobster fishery in Richmond County. So it's important to also consider the impact that that is having on them as well. The question before us today, as part of this emergency debate, is the concerns about markets and the concerns about the price that is going to be offered to fishermen in the upcoming season starting in Southwest Nova. Mr. Speaker, it was, I remember as a very young boy when the price of lobster was around $3.50 a pound, which was approximately, I think as the member from Shelburne said, 18, 20 years ago, when I first started working in the fishery. And we saw it gradually increase from that point. And I can tell you in Richmond County, there was such low catches and having such a small price, it was a very difficult fishery, to say the least. In fact, fishermen would usually make more money on EI than they did during the season. That's how bad things were. And it's only been the last number of years that that financial reality has actually changed. But, Mr. Speaker, one of the big problems in our province, and I'm going to disagree a bit with my colleague from Digby-Annapolis and the member from Shelburne, in that their focus has been on the federal government and what the federal government should be doing. But we need to realize that other than issuing a license and making sure that the enforcement around the fishery takes place, that's the only role that DFO and the federal government have in our fishery. They're not concerned about markets. They're not concerned about prices. They're not concerned about how we ship it, where we store it, how it gets to where it needs to go. The federal government absolutely doesn't care about that because it's not part of what they do. Who should care about that? The government of Nova Scotia and the Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture. And the big problem is, over the years, Mr. Speaker, is that unfortunately, in successive governments, I think it's safe to say, is that we've taken a laissez-faire approach when it's come to our fishery in Nova Scotia. We've basically said, everything's working fine, it's going well, let's just sit down at the end of the year and say, here's how much money the fishery brought us this year. That's basically been the approach for the most part. And that's unfortunate, because we now find ourselves in a situation where everything's not going well, and the markets aren't what they used to be, and where we're selling our product aren't prepared to pay what they used to pay. And now we find ourselves that the Minister of Fisheries says that they do have a marketing plan. And I commend them for that. I'm pleased to hear that there's finally a marketing plan. But the question is, this government's been in office going on almost 10 years, and it's now that we hear that there's going to be a marketing plan. So what have we been doing all this time? And now, Mr. Speaker, I'd be remiss if I didn't remind Nova Scotians that this was the government under the previous Premier who took away the Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture as a standalone department. It was mixed in with agriculture, again sending the signal that this government did not appreciate the important role that it had to play in the Nova Scotia fishery. So I do commend the current Premier and his government for having made a standalone minister, but there's still issues about the fact that whether the deputy, there's a standalone deputy, and whether the proper focus is being given on this very department. And Mr. Speaker, I can tell you that it was only a few years ago when the member from Cumberland North was holding, it was not a full department at the time, Fisheries and Agriculture, and I started asking him questions, asking him how many processing plants do we have in Nova Scotia doing crab? He didn't know the answer. How many are doing shrimp? Didn't know the answer. What's the exact amount of pounds of lobsters land in Nova Scotia? Didn't know. How much crab landed? Didn't know. How much shrimp landed? Didn't know. Mr. Speaker, if our Minister of Fisheries and Agriculture in this province doesn't know that information, who does? And yet the Minister of Fisheries tells us today that the value of lobster, just lobster, is $400 to $450 million a year. Now add crab, add shrimp, add scallops, and all the rest of our seafood. If I'm not mistaken, seafood continues to be our #1 export in Nova Scotia. If it's not #1, it's #2. But it certainly was #1 for the longest time. But what's ironic, Mr. Speaker, is ask yourself how much value added processing goes on in the Nova Scotia fishery. And it's almost none. Almost all of the products I've just listed, lobster, crab, shrimp, and scallops, are taken out of the water and shipped out of the province. And that's not acceptable, Mr. Speaker, and DFO is not going to change that. It's not in their mandate. The people who need to change is the province of Nova Scotia. And I do agree with the minister, the member from Shelburne, when he talks about a task force, and I think he's referring to a federal task force. What I'd like to know is, why do we not have a provincial task force? Why is this issue falling only to the Minister of Fisheries when we know that seafood products is our biggest export in Nova Scotia? Why is it not falling to the Minister of Economic Development? Why is it not falling to the Minister of Finance? Why is it not falling to other ministries to say we need to work all together, knowing that this is such a vital part of our economy? We can't just ask the Minister of Fisheries on his own and say, look, take a couple of chefs and go out west and let's hope for the best. It's not enough. And I think they need to work with the Minister of Fisheries to indicate the importance of this very issue of identifying these markets and strengthening this industry. You know, Mr. Speaker, I've had the opportunity to speak to a few individual people in the trucking industry and that, telling me about some of the products that they've been taking from the Eastern Shore and trucking it down to New York to be put on a plane. Species I wasn't even aware that were landing in this province. And what value added is taking place or processing? Almost none. It's almost going right out of the water to the wharf, on a truck, off to New York, on a plane. And the question I have is, could we be doing more with these products? I'm not suggesting that we need to open a whole bunch of fish plants again, but is there more value added that we can be doing? My question I'd have to the Minister of Fisheries is, what is he doing to work with processors and buyers here in Nova Scotia to do value added for lobster here in the province? I know of at least one buyer in one area of the province where they've been developing lobster tails. And they've been marketing lobster tails. And they're actually getting quite a value just for the tails. And the tails are taken, they can be baked, they can be deep fried, they can be fried right in a frying pan. There's all sorts of things that can be done. But that's just one example, and the question is the Minister of Fisheries and his department actually working to find what value added we can do in this province? Or again, is it just a laissez-faire attitude of, it'll come out of the water, it'll be trucked out, and then we'll say at the end of the year it's our biggest export in Nova Scotia. It's not good enough, and it's unfortunate that we now find ourselves in a potential crisis that the government is finally saying that it's prepared to take action in identifying new markets. I know that the Minister of Fisheries regularly attends the Boston Seafood Show. That's a very worthwhile show for our government and our province to be involved in. But the question is, when you hear about seafood shows taking place in Dubai and taking place over in Asia and taking place over in Europe, is Nova Scotia there to market our product? And if we're not there, why are we not there? And again, why is the Department of Economic Development, through NSBI or through any of its other divisions, not working with fisheries at trying to identify markets? It's not just a matter of telling Nova Scotians how to cook lobster differently that's going to change our industry. And so we find ourselves in the situation that we're in now, where, especially in Southwest Nova, where massive investments have been made in both the purchasing of licenses and in the vessels that are used. And I'd almost suggest to you, Mr. Speaker, that when it comes to lobster fishery, Southwest Nova is almost a unique area in that sense, because back in Richmond County, they're still fishing out of 28-foot boats and 30-foot boats. That's not the case in Southwest Nova. They're fishing out of 55-foot boats, massive vessels. And massive vessels come with a massive price. And the value of their licenses have been very high for years, so it's not abnormal for people to be in for $1 million or slightly less than that to get into the industry. And any downturn is going to have a major impact. And right now, as the previous, both the mayor from Shelburne and the mayor from Digby Annapolis said, you're looking at half the price of what there was last year. Unfortunately, the loan payments don't fall by half. The interest on those loans don't fall by half either. And that's the reality that we are being faced with. And yes, Mr. Speaker, it is the lifeblood of many rural communities, but I would suggest to you, when seafood is one of the top, if not the top, export in Nova Scotia, I would suggest to you it's the lifeblood of this province. And we cannot just suggest that it's rural communities such as mine or such as yours, Mr. Speaker, where you're from. This is something that affects everyone in Nova Scotia, because that revenue goes to pay through taxes for our hospitals, for our roads, for all of our services. So it affects all Nova Scotians, and therefore all Nova Scotians should be concerned anytime that there's a potential collapse in a fishery such as lobster fishery. So, Mr. Speaker, I know that the Minister of Fisheries, I can tell you I'm pleased to see him in that portfolio, because I mentioned earlier the frustrations with one of the previous ministers, but I know that the current minister has a vested knowledge and a vested interest in seeing our fishery succeed. My message to his colleagues would be that he needs help, and it should not be left to the Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture alone to be dealing with this problem. The Department of Economic Development should be there, the Department of Finance should be there, and any other divisions of government that can assist in identifying new markets and making sure that we continue to achieve the success that we achieve here in this province, and that our fishermen and everyone involved in our fishing industry can continue to play such a vital role in the future prosperity of Nova Scotia. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The Honourable the Minister of Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it's with regrets that I have to stand here and debate this bill today, or the debate onto the potential crisis in Southwest Nova. Mr. Speaker, just to give you a little background of my life onto the water, you know, in my younger years, that was many years ago, and I used to go out dumping day, and I'd take the week off from my own company, and I'd go with my family members and spend the week out. And I'd take 7 days onto the water with them, and I was sick for 7 days. And if I can give anybody any advice into the House today, I suggest anybody that gets a bit emotional or seasick, don't eat egg sandwiches and go on the water, because it's not really good for you. And Mr. Speaker, you know, I have family members that's into the lobster fisheries. My mother hails from Cape Sable Island, from Clam Point, Mr. Speaker, that, you know, the tradition there is the fisheries. And, you know, so it goes back through my roots for many of generations, the fisheries, and to all of Southwest Nova. Mr. Speaker, the lobster fisheries is the backbone of Southwest Nova. It's the backbone to the economy of this province, Mr. Speaker. And I know I'm nervous. I speak to the fishermen and to the buyers, to their families. Last weekend, I blatantly asked a question to fishermen in my community. What can our government do to help you? And they were going to bring it to the table and ask members of LA 34, what could the government of Nova Scotia do to help you? But Mr. Speaker, I also want to point out, I just want to correct the member from Richmond, that members on this side are all helping our Minister of Fisheries, and I'm very proud of our Minister of Fisheries. He's doing an excellent job, and I thank the member for acknowledging that. Mr. Speaker, And I also have sent a letter off to the new Minister of DFO in Ottawa to have a meeting to accompany the Minister of Fisheries. This has a serious impact onto my riding and to all of our province, and I think everybody in this House has an important part to play into it. And I can assure the members into the House that this evening I'll be meeting with the Honourable Peter MacKay, and I will be bringing this to the forefront with the Honourable Peter MacKay about the fisheries in Southwest Nova. And I can assure the members also that I will be meeting with the new member, our new MP from Southwest, Greg Kerr, that is in tune with the issue at hand, and we'll be dealing with the Minister of Fisheries in Ottawa onto the crisis that may happen in Southwest Nova. And I suggest other members from Southwest area to talk to your new MP and let him know your feelings on what's going to happen with the fisheries in Southwest Nova. Forget about political stripes. Think about the person and they're representing us in Ottawa, and those people have to be on side to work with us, Mr. Speaker. And I see smiles from members opposite. Well, I don't care. This is not political, Mr. Speaker. This is an issue that is going to affect all Nova Scotians, Mr. Speaker. It's going to affect members of my family. It's going to affect members from opposite families. It's going to affect the economy of Nova Scotia. And I think that we all have a part to play. And that's why I am more than willing to get to my feet, go to Ottawa, and support our Minister of Fisheries and this government and stand up for the economy of Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker. And I want to also say congratulations to the Minister for looking at new marketing initiatives in this province, Mr. Speaker, for our fisheries. I firmly believe that there are markets close to home. Europe, there's maybe our markets, but I believe the Western provinces are our markets, Mr. Speaker. I can tell you, my brother-in-law works out in the oil sands, and he's telling me that there are definitely markets in the Alberta area, Saskatchewan area, BC, Mr. Speaker. We have markets that we haven't tapped yet, and I believe that that's what we have to be focused on. There are markets right here in our own province. We have to let people know that this is a product from Nova Scotia, and we should be buying Nova Scotia first, Mr. Speaker. But it's not a job for one member. It's a job for all of us in this House, Mr. Speaker, to deal with this. And I believe that partnering and working together is the answer. And I believe that the new federal government will listen to us. We will have our meeting, and we will get our points across, Mr. Speaker, that this is very important to our economy in Nova Scotia. Regardless of what the dollar value is, what it does, I can tell you in my home riding. What this does, the support teams that's working onto the wharfs, the people, the buyers, all their support team that they have, that's waiting for the boats to come in at night to buy and weigh and put the lobsters away into their cars, Mr. Speaker. But if you go to our shopping centres, you go to our boutiques, they are waiting for the lobster fisheries, Mr. Speaker. That's what makes our economy grow in Southwest Nova. And all of our stores are waiting for the lobster fisheries. And I'll tell you, they're crossing their fingers and hoping that we have a good market, that these men and women that risk their lives, Mr. Speaker, every day. Like I was laying on the deck most of the time I was out there because I was sick. But I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, these men and women that are onto these boats, they risk their lives. They're out there in terrible conditions, and they're risking their lives. But they are creating wealth in our economy. And I tell you, hats off to them for the jobs that they do. My brother's son has his own boat, and he goes out, and last year, the first day that he pulled his traps, he went out, he pulled his traps, baited them, came in, and went right back out, and that man landed 9,400 pounds of lobsters the very first 24 hours, Mr. Speaker. That's a lot of lobsters. But if they're at $2.50 a pound or even $3 a pound, they cannot make a living at that, Mr. Speaker. They cannot pay their bills and make a living at that. That's why we have to work with the fisheries. But I don't want to go and dictate to our fishermen. I want to go and listen to their concerns and bring their concerns to our minister that is listening to the concerns and see what we can do to help them, to relieve some of the pressures, Mr. Speaker, and I think that that's what our job is to do, is to help out our fisheries, not to walk in and dictate to our fisheries. And I know the member from Digby and the member from Shelburne knows what I'm saying. I don't think it's any of our places to dictate to them. I think it's our places here to work with them and to see what we can do to help them out. And that's, I can tell you, that's what I intend to do. And the information that I can get again this weekend, I will be relaying back to the Minister of Fisheries and let him know what their concerns are. And if it's relief for their fishermen's loan, that's something that the minister will have to deal with, and he'll have to bring to his cabinet colleagues to see what we can do. But I want to hear from them. I do not want to walk into their business and dictate to them, Mr. Speaker. I want to work with them, because that is our economy. The economy, I'll tell you, if our lobster fisheries in Southwest Nova goes down, we are doomed in Southwest Nova. And that's why we have to do whatever we can to work with them. And I must say that I appreciate what the member from Digby did to bring this debate to the table here today. I appreciate it, and I appreciate him speaking, and the member from Shelburne speaking very passionately, like they know the industry, they've worked in the industry, and they know what it means to the economy of Southwest Nova, Mr. Speaker. You know, you go to the car lots and you ask them, they're waiting too. Everybody's waiting for the lobster fisheries in Southwest Nova. The restaurants, everybody in Southwest Nova, it is the lifeblood of our communities in Southwest Nova. So whatever we can do to relieve some of the pressures off of the industry, they're all business people. I forget the number, 938 boats? There you go, thank you very much. That's all independent businesses in Southwest Nova. And they're hiring and paying staff to work with them. And it's a spin-off from it. It's like the little manufacturing company in Pubnico that manufactures the wire traps, Mr. Speaker. Like, there's so much spin-off from this, it's unbelievable. So I believe that my job as the MLA is to listen to the concerns of the people that are in the business and to see what we can do as government, and then bring that information back to the good Minister of Fisheries and get him and his staff to assess all the information and see what he can bring forward to Cabinet to help the lobster fisheries. And Mr. Speaker, I think that's everybody's job. And I can assure you, as long as I'm the member from Yarmouth, I'll do my job. And that's listening to the concerns of the industry. So, Mr. Speaker, with those few words, I'd like to share my time with my colleague from Argyll, and I thank you for the time.
Thank you. The Chair recognizes the Honourable the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. How much time do I have on this one?
Schedule. I'll get
Yeah,
back.
okay, well, we're working on the schedule. But I want to thank, again, the member for Digby Annapolis for bringing this issue forward. It's one of timing here that is probably more critical than the issue itself. And let's not forget that our lobster fishermen that are from, of course, from the area, all around from Shelburne right around to Digby, and then of course the different district, which we'll talk about District 34 for now, that they're going fishing on Monday, I think. That's the question. Because we've got into a bit of a conundrum here where the system itself, I don't think works very well. Because you have an LFA that is less than a week away from putting those pots in the water, and they haven't decided on whether they're going to move the start date. They haven't made a decision on whether they could go to a 3-day limit that I know that the member opposite has talked about on a couple of occasions. So there's some very critical pieces and some decisions that need to be made now. When has it been confirmed to? Monday. Well, there you go. And I think that's the wrong thing. Because as we move closer to Christmas time, as that market will start to either establish itself or not establish itself, I think that there might be too much fish caught in a very short period of time, and therefore driving what is a low number down even further. There are some pieces that we really need to get together on and have a true discussion. And I know the LFA is doing the work, as much work as they can, working in concert with the federal government, with DFO. But I think there's more work that needs to be done, and I think that's where the provincial government comes into play. That's where the Minister of Fishery comes into play, which is I know that the Minister of Fishery has put some things together and is willing to try to find some of these solutions, which are in my estimation, is one to try to get that fish out of the Boston area, get it into some new markets. Either in the U.S., there could be some opportunities. I know the Minister of Economic Development was down in Chicago and in the Midwest. There's some opportunities here in Canada. There are opportunities in Europe. And it's time to start focusing on those areas to try to do it. So I know the guys that are probably down at Vernon Dion's right now having a coffee, trying to figure out what the heck to do over the next few days. You know, what is that market going to bear? What is it going to look like? You know, I think that the guys have to really think ahead. This is an important market, and it's too important to just throw lobsters into it. We need to be very measured right now on the stock that we're going to be bringing in forward. And I think there are people there that believe in that understand that. But I think at the same time, we need to be supporting the LFA. We need to be supporting the fishermen in trying to find the buyers, to try to find those new markets. Again, I'm not a fisherman. I'm sort of like the MLA for Yarmouth, the Minister of Energy. I spend more time on the deck throwing up than I do fishing. Unfortunately, from a fishing family, that's kind of frowned upon, I guess. But you know, after 5 or 6 days, you know, you kind of get your sea legs under you and you get going. But lobster fishing, I know that lobster fishing is very, very difficult. And the Minister of Energy was very correct that a lot of these guys put their lives on the line a lot of times when they go out in bad weather. They go out into some circumstances that they shouldn't be out in, but they do to get that lobster. Right now, it's so important. You know, if I look at the Ford dealership, if I look at the Vernon Dion lobster plugs, if I look at all the supply services that are in Argyle that need the cash flow that lobster fishery brings us, all of them are sitting there wondering with almost a broken heart right now because they see what is so vibrant, what's so important for them, you know, on the cusp of possibly losing it. So we all need to work together. Never mind the political stripes here. Never mind the different districts that we got. It doesn't matter if you're from Digby or from Argyle or from Yarmouth or from Shelburne or anywhere else in this province. We need to be there to help support those individuals, working with our Minister of Fisheries and working with that federal government that does hold so many cards when it comes to the fishery in Southwest Nova Scotia. So I thank you for the opportunity to stand today and speak to this extremely important topic for Southwest Nova Scotia.
Thank you. The Honourable Member for Pictou.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure for me to stand in this House at this time to speak on this important issue. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Energy mentioned some smiling faces on this side of the House. I didn't see any smiling faces, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there's no one smiling in southwestern Nova Scotia today. This is a serious, serious situation. And I'm very, very proud to ride shotgun with the member from Shelburne because he has so many times taken a stand for the fish harvesters of southwestern Nova Scotia and for the entire province of Nova Scotia. And I would have dearly loved to have been riding shotgun for the member from Annapolis, Digby Annapolis, and I just wish that he were in our caucus because he is a great member, a great member. These two have shown leadership when others have been involved in situations of listening and assessing and taking a wait-and-see attitude. These two have been calling for action, Mr. Speaker, calling for action. You know, this situation just doesn't involve southwestern Nova Scotia because it could have ramifications on other seasons throughout this province unless we show leadership, unless we get some butts in Ottawa and take stands like some other provinces have taken when issues of concern have come forward. We have to do more than just listen and assess. We have seasons that will be opening down the road next spring in my riding, in the Northumberland Strait. We have seasons that will be opening in Cape Breton. We have seasons that will be opening on the Eastern Shore. We have, Mr. Speaker, in the gallery today, Danny Hansen from Louisbourg Seafoods, and he knows a lot about crab and lobster and the problems that exist in this industry, because he is one of the people that is on the forefront in relationship to dealing with these problems and trying to sell in these marketplaces that are being hit with such volatility. There are declining orders. There are credit problems here in Nova Scotia and in the U.S. This industry is worth $1 billion to the economy of Canada. We send lobsters to 55 countries, and most of these are having problems at this time, economic problems. And we are in an assessment mode. We are in an assessment mode. Mr. Speaker, I don't know as much about the industry as the two members that I referenced earlier with such great respect. But I have spent over 30 years in the fishery, in the public and private sector of the fishery. I was involved in buying crab, in buying lobster. I was involved in negotiating the purchase of the Mullins operation in Manitou, which is a lobster operation. My son came up and bought lobsters there for the company that I was involved with for a year. I've tried to sell product. I've gone to Korea and Japan trying to sell product from Nova Scotia. And Mr. Speaker, we have to take some leadership on this issue. Our approach to Ottawa is one of Mr. Harper or Prime Minister Harper or Minister Shea, you know, do you think you might be able to do something for us? You know, sending a letter to the Prime Minister on some issues, or sending a letter to the Minister of Fisheries and Oceans. I mean, we have to do more. We have to take we have to look at the Premier of Manitoba, Gary Dorr, and look how he has been involved in issues like Air Canada in closures. We have to be somewhat, perhaps not quite like Premier Danny Williams, but we have to take a stand. We have to take a stand. We don't go hat in hand in a letter, you know. I mean, Danny Williams would say, cough, Stevie, cough it up, Stevie, you know. I mean, there's a different approach here. We really have to start looking at some action. And we have to look at deferred loans. We have to look at access to capital. And above all, we have to get involved in consultation and communication. I mean, our fish harvesters in southwestern Nova Scotia are reading about billions of dollars going to big banks to bail them out. We're seeing the auto industry poised to receive tremendous billions of dollars probably, and our fish harvesters in southwestern Nova Scotia, one of the most important industries that we have in this province. And what are we doing? What are we doing? Have we been in the minister's office? Have we done more than write a letter? Mr. Speaker, we have to come together here. You know, I just looked at some of the headlines. The lobster market meltdown could mean $100 million loss to the local economy. $100 million. And we cannot sit on our thumbs and talk about a 3-year marketing program, when the season is opening next Monday. On the 24th, the season will be opening. And we're talking about a 3-year plan that we're going to start kicking something in December. We have to wake up here. We have to get Ottawa to wake up to the needs of the fish harvesters of southwestern Nova Scotia and the entire province of Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker. You know, this situation, I believe that I could go on for hours in relationship to this, and I promised the member from Queens that I would, in fact, give her a small portion of my time, because this is very important to her area as well. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure when I started, but how much time do I have to share?
Approximately 8 minutes.
Thank you very much. You know, we have a situation where I've been looking at some of the emails that are being sent to newspapers in southwestern Nova Scotia in relationship to what harvesters are saying in response to the newspaper stories. And I'd like to quote one of them that I just jotted down a few moments ago. I can foresee that if this trend doesn't change, our family will lose our house, be living on the street, and collecting welfare. And we certainly won't be the only ones. That was from a fish harvester in southwestern Nova Scotia. And we will not be the only ones. So, Mr. Speaker, after the debate we had in this House that I participated in last night, where we talked about a $4 increase for people on welfare, when we talked about the 8% that this government put on the people in increased taxes for electricity, Mr. Speaker, welfare isn't the answer for these people in southwestern Nova Scotia. They need a hand up, as the minister from Shelburne, I hope he will be a minister someday, as the member for Shelburne has indicated. They need a hand up. They don't need a handout. They don't want a handout. They want a hand up. And this government has to do something. It has to get to Ottawa. It has to move on from the status quo, the little bit of wait and see business that we have been hearing for the last little while. And I just wish I had time to get wound up on this issue, Mr. Speaker, because I can say much more on this issue, because it's very dear to my heart, this fishing industry. But I will share a little bit of time with the member for Queens.
Thank you. The Honourable Member for Queens.
Thank you. Thank you to my colleague for sharing some of the time on this very important debate. And I want to thank the member for Digby-Annapolis for bringing this resolution to the floor today. And I also want to thank my honourable colleague and member for Shelburne for talking about this very important issue over this past few weeks here, because it is extremely important. It was just a little while ago when my honourable colleague and member from Shelburne and I did a wharf tour around the constituency of Queens, and I represent a portion of LFA 33, which runs from Baraka Point in Shelburne as far up as Sambro. And certainly during that particular day, where we were talking to many fishermen, they were discussing with my colleague and I many concerns they had about the fishing industry in general, but nobody seen this coming, and certainly that was not on their radar screen on that particular day, chatting about other issues of importance to our fishermen. this uncertain economic times has certainly taken this industry, taken the wind out of the sails of this very important industry. And we really need to come together and on a united front, such as the fishermen today are very united in this cause and wanting to move some action forward. On Sunday, I received a call from a very well-known and respected fisherman in my area, a person who has kept me in touch and certainly in the loop about many of the issues and concerns of fishermen in my area. And Captain Blandford Nickerson came in several times and started alerting me and telling me that things were happening in the industry that were going to be a major concern, and fishermen were already just several weeks ago feeling the uncertainty of the economic conditions. On Sunday, he called me and told me that a meeting was going to be held in Wedgeport and wanted to know if I was able to attend that meeting. And certainly he had already been in touch with my colleague, a member from Shelburne, who had assured him that he would be at that meeting. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend, but I can tell you, when I was talking to Captain Nickerson, there was panic in his voice. There was absolute panic about what this meant for the fishing industry, for the fishermen, not only in areas 33 and 34, but all across the province as the seasons start to roll out. It was very unsettling to hear his concerns for many of his colleagues and family members who fish. My neighbors, who several of them are fishermen. My husband will sometimes go out at the end of the season and will work the last day with some of our neighbors who are lobster fishermen. And I can tell you, I worry very much for those families. A few of our neighbors are young families just starting out. Some of them have been fishing for many, many years, all of their lives, but they're very concerned. They're very concerned about the overheads that they have, the boat loans, the licenses, the gear, deckhands, and the market price for these lobsters right now are just not going to cut it. It's not going to help these fishermen get through this season. And I would like to ask this House and all members to take a proposal that has been moved by my colleague and good member from Shelburne, and he's proposed a solution, and that solution is to come up with a program or a package that looks at deferred loan payments for these fishermen. It's very important that we stand united, that my good member and colleague from Shelburne and the good member from Digby-Annapolis accompany the Minister here of Fisheries to Ottawa to come up with that solution, to present that solution in Ottawa, and we all stand together united to give our fishermen a hand up. And thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The honourable member for Kings West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and pleased to join the emergency debate today on the lobster fishery. While it only in a very minimal way affects my riding, as there are a few lobster fishermen, the Hamiltons, the Keneallys, First Nations, that come out of Harbourville in Kings County. But all of Nova Scotia is in fact likely to be impacted if this is a devastating season, and all prospects are now that the risk and danger of lobster fishing is actually being played out right now before they ever go on the water. There is great fear in the industry that this industry, in particular southwestern Nova Scotia, the most lucrative in North America, especially comprising areas 33 and 34. And for those perhaps watching the debate at home today, Area 33 extends from Cole Harbour to a point near Bacaro, Shelburne County, and Area 34, the richest lobster grounds, extends from there around to Digby. And this is an area that if you take out some of the kinds of millions of dollars that this industry brings in each year. I'll just quote one year where the statistics were very strong. 2004 and 5, Area 34, one of the best seasons in recent years, had landings worth $320 million. So you start taking even 50 or 100 million out of that picture, and all prospects are unfortunately looking that way. Grand Manan and southern New Brunswick started the fishery last week, and fishermen were getting $3.50 a pound, and by Sunday it had dropped to $3.25 a pound. In fact, there may be fishermen who are in the process of deciding whether they can even put their boats in the water this year. So there is indeed a looming crisis, Mr. Speaker. And when you take a look at this, the area of 33 and 34, it makes a horseshoe around southwestern Nova Scotia. And I think of the communities like Bridgewater and the New Minas-Kentville area, where you have all the major car dealerships. And it is that period from late November until Christmas that many of them have their best sales, because this is when the lobster fishermen and their families are making their income practically for the year. So when we start to take a look at this money drying up and no longer being infused into that part of the economy of southwestern Nova Scotia and impacting on the province, we know that we're in for some very, very difficult times. And I just a couple of more points before I hand my time over to a former Minister of Fisheries, colleague from Preston. And I do want to say that there is a glorious opportunity here for the Minister and government to immediately put to work a group of 4 or 5 people who can quickly look at markets, who can quickly look at how there can be an injection of monies, hand up as we're talking about here, for these fishermen. I think 4 or 5 people who have the knowledge and the wisdom around the lobster fishery, who can make some things happen hopefully quickly. Why not, if the market is there in Europe, get the planes in place that are looking like there won't be that number this year. I think Henry Dumont from the, I always call him Captain Highliner, but from National Sea, he said it best this week in a CBC interview, and he said they've fared fairly well to date, their fish processing. And he said he sees some of the banking financial crises as dissipating. However, the economic crisis is now starting. And southwestern Nova Scotia could show up on that barometer immensely being in a depressed state this winter. So we really need to see all parties come together on this. I think in this year of democracy, what a great opportunity for government and all of us as MLAs to restore confidence in the Nova Scotia electorate by creating that kind of credibility to respond to a crisis, to a need. It's a great opportunity, and the next few weeks must see that happen. It will play itself out, I'm afraid, very quickly, and with that, I pass over to my colleague.
Thank you. The Honourable, the member for Preston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, it's a very sad day that we have to have this discussion in the legislature, and the economic impact that's coming for Nova Scotia is something that we haven't seen in many, many years. And it's very unfortunate that the economy in the U.S. and the economy in the world indeed is going to have such a profound effect on us here in Nova Scotia. The issue with the lobster fishery is great. Over the years, the value of the lobster fishery has already been said here by all my colleagues, has grown to an incredibly good industry. I can remember when I was a very small child that the price of a lobster was insignificant and nobody even wanted to buy them at the time. And how that has changed and how the industry has done so well to improve that and work on it. The issue of shipping lobsters to Europe is a very serious one. It's one that I worked on a great deal when I was Minister of Fisheries. And there is a big problem at the Halifax International Airport. Nobody talks about it, but there's a major problem there. And as far as I know, that problem hasn't gone away. And until the international airport allows the planes to land from outside the country, freighters that can move these lobsters and reliably move them, and also to ensure that they're moved in a timely manner. I can remember at one point many years ago that there was several metric tons of lobsters on a freighter ready to go, and the freighter was were being de-iced. The captain and the co-pilot and everything were all set to go, and Air Canada had to de-ice another plane, so they took it off that plane for an hour and a half, and an hour and a half later they come back to de-ice it, and guess what? The captain and the co-pilot were over the number of hours they were allowed to be on the plane, stopped the plane, destroyed the whole shipment. So this is the kind of foolishness that's going on. This has got to stop. It really has to stop. Nobody talks about this. And it's time we talked about it. It's time we put some pressure on. We've seen Air Canada move their staff out of here, and at the same time, they do nothing to help us move these lobsters and this valuable freight that could go to a place in Europe and other places that we can get a higher price out of. And it's a serious issue. And there's so many issues in the fishery, and the Minister of Fishery rightfully talks about marketing. Unfortunately, marketing doesn't happen in 24 hours. It doesn't happen in 1 week. It doesn't happen in a month. It takes a long time to market a product and to create a demand for it, and by creating demand, increasing the price for it. So I'm glad to hear that the minister is going to pursue that, but unfortunately, it's going to be a long time before that has a real positive impact, unless we get really, really lucky, and there is somebody there looking for lobsters and didn't realize there was none in Nova Scotia. And I can tell you, from the lobster fishing industry I've seen here, and from the people that are in the industry, I would doubt that's very, very, very unlikely that's going to happen. We've got some very high-quality fish processors here that are marketing all over the world and have done very successfully, and that's one reason our lobster was at the high price it was at and why they could move so much lobster. So I think that we really have to have, all parties have to address this issue. This is not political. This is important to our economy. We've seen our tourism industry basically go down the drain in the province of Nova Scotia. With the receipts gone that we've typically seen as people not traveling here, and the cost of doing business for the boats are not going away. The costs are going to be there, and we're going to be faced with people losing their homes, they're going to lose their licenses, they're going to lose their boats, and all the other people around that, the gear suppliers and everybody else in the province. And everybody in the province is going to be affected by this. It's so many millions of dollars that are here and such an important part of our economy. Even the people that don't realize that, you know, as you think of lobsters, oh, well, I don't buy lobsters, I don't eat lobsters, and nobody I know works with lobsters. Well, I could bet you don't have to go very far, and there's somebody that you know or a relative of yours that is indeed affected by lobsters financially, or their job, or their family is, and that's in the whole province. So this is a very serious issue. It's probably the most serious issue that's faced this province in probably the last 10 to 20 years. And I think that we have to work together as one group, as this Legislative Assembly, to resolve this problem and help these very solid entrepreneurs through this, because the fishermen will survive, but we've got to make sure they'll survive and prosper so they can move forward again and keep our economy going. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair will recognize the honourable member from Victoria of the Lakes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, much of the conversation this afternoon is dealing with the fishery in southwest Nova, mainly because of the immediacy that's there, but it's actually an issue throughout this province. Mr. Speaker, in Victoria of the Lakes, there are fishing ports in Bay St. Lawrence, Dingwall, Neils Harbour, Ingonish, Little River, Big Bernard, just to name a few. When you consider the number of boats and the number of people that work in each of these boats, in each of these ports, you can imagine the dollars that flow into each and every community. Mr. Speaker, as the honourable member from Kings West and many others have said this afternoon, this is a province-wide issue that needs to be addressed. Our minister, Mr. Speaker, has made his commitment to help, but each of us in this House have to put politics aside and work together with our minister to provide a united voice with our federal counterparts. Mr. Speaker, over the next few months, I, as the member of Victoria the Lakes, plan to set up meetings with the fishers in each of these ports in their own community to hear the concerns and the challenges they face and present them to the minister so that collectively we can work together for the betterment of the fishery within this province. Mr. Speaker, as I mentioned, we realize how many dollars go into each and every community that are affected by the fishery, and the spin-offs that come about as a result in the supermarkets in our communities, in the stores, in the car dealerships, and much, much more. It is province-wide, and it's something that does have immediacy, especially as it relates to Southwest Nova, but it has immediacy as it relates to each and every port within this province. With those few words, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to share my time with my honourable member to my right.
Thank you. The Honourable Minister of Tourism, Culture and Heritage.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I also would like to have a few moments here to discuss and to take part in debate of how important this issue is, not only to the members of this House, but to all fishermen, fishermen's families, and the people of Nova Scotia. And Mr. Speaker, people know that I represent the Eastern Shore, and I have many fishing communities on the Eastern Shore, in the Lawrencetown area, the Three Fathom Harbour down and through the Chesancooks, the Pepeswick's, Ostia Lakes, the Jadors, the Little Harbour, and so on and so forth, and further on down the Eastern Shore Ship Harbour, and so on. You know, Mr. Speaker, the way the community is designed, or the Eastern Shore is designed, maybe in one harbour you may have one or two fishermen, or maybe even one, and in another harbour you may have a lot of fishermen. Bottom line is, fishing industry is important to Nova Scotians. And as the Minister said, the Minister of Fisheries said earlier on, that he takes this issue very seriously. And also a few comments from across the way have been made. You know, what is the government's position in relation to this? Well, the government has said clearly that as far as, for instance, the Fishermen's Loan Board, that the government and that loan board is not here to hurt the fishermen or the fisherman's family, but here to work with and support them. And I believe in the minister, I believe in this government, that when the crunch, or if, I should say, maybe it would be better to say if the crunch comes, that the government will be there to support them in that manner. Mr. Speaker, I also would like to say that it doesn't only affect fisheries, but also many different, portfolios within government. For instance, as far as tourism, the minister, it's very important for me to make sure that we have, good lobster, hard-shelled lobster, a good quality product, to make sure that it's there to promote tourism in the parts of Nova Scotia. Actually, tourists will come to our fishing villages to buy or partake in festivals, especially with the very famous Atlantic lobster. Maybe I should say, and not speaking for, but the Minister of Economic Development, of course, would have an interest as well, and would want for the fishery to be strong and to move forward, because the more money the fishermen make, in fact, the better the province does and other people. Growing up in a fishing community, Mr. Speaker, I've watched the benefit of a strong fishing community. And I've watched the fishermen, the fishers in my community work long and hard hours, and I've realized the benefit. When the fishery is strong, our economy on the Eastern Shore is strong. Quite honestly, the grad stations sell more gas, the building supplies, sell more building supplies. The fishermen build pieces on their houses, new houses. They look after their boats. The mechanics are busy. And in a rural area, the economics of a strong fisheries are very important. That's why when the minister said when the House rises that he'd be interested in making a meeting with the federal Minister Shea, and to explain our position here, that it's very important for us to possibly to look at this in a very beneficial way to find a solution. Mr. Speaker, I hope this does not come to crisis stage, and I understand that that's not necessarily the case, but it's quite right. We know with the world economy in a slowdown that people may not be buying as many lobsters as they ordinarily have, and I don't think we would not notice the fact that possibly there will be a slowdown in the market, whether it's $2.50, whether it's $4 a pound, whether it's $7 a pound, the price will be set. And there's a mechanism in relation to setting the price of lobsters. Mr. Speaker, I can remember when the fishing season is over on the Eastern Shore, we always have a conversation with our fishing people and say, was it a good year? Hoping, Mr. Speaker, hoping that they can say, yes, it was as strong as last year, or sometimes they say, it wasn't a bad year, we were able to get by. And so you can be prepared to be presented that answer. It was a bad year, no, it was a good year, or we got by. So they sort of rated in the previous years. And we've experienced some hard times already in the past in the lobster fishery. I can remember when the lobster was at $2.50 a pound a few years ago, and I also can remember when the fishermen were getting as high as $6.57 and sometimes more. And they understand. Each fishing person understands that it sort of goes in cycles. What I always say is, if you go to the wharf, that's how we traditionally buy our lobsters on the Eastern Shore. I believe that's how it happens throughout Nova Scotia. Going down on the wharf because you know what time, Mr. Speaker, your fisherman is coming in, or fisher person is coming in, and you know what time their boat comes in. You prefer their lobster, I'll tell you. And you know what the price is, because when you go to the grad station, you go to the restaurant, or you go to the library, it doesn't matter what is the price of lobsters, what are the price of lobsters this year. So and you go there. And I always said, I always like for the price to be fair, but I always looked at it this way. If I went to the wharf and I was to purchase 10 pounds of lobsters at $5 a pound, which would be $50, I would have no problem paying $6 a pound, because that puts an extra $1 per pound on the lobsters. And when you spread that over the purchase of all the lobsters over the season, the lobsterman or lobster person will do better. So anyway, on the Eastern Shore, we never wanted to bargain and try to get the cheapest price for the lobster, because we knew that if we could get a fair price and put more dollars in their pockets, in return, someone in that rural area was going to benefit. The guy at the grad station would get more, the contractor would get more, the painter would get more. They buy their ATVs, they go hunting, so the ammunition would be bought there, or they do whatever with the money to roll it back into our economy. Fishermen in Nova Scotia are well respected. Fishermen in Nova Scotia work hard. Fishermen in Nova Scotia are very intelligent people. They know their industry. They can forecast the future, and they can tell what the price lobsters may be in the next season. And this is why we're here discussing this today, because they're forecasting a possible decline in the price of lobster. But, Mr. Speaker, I don't want to see it. I want to see a strong price for their lobster per pound in the southwestern part of Nova Scotia, because I'm on the Eastern Shore, and soon spring will come, and the season will be open on the Eastern Shore. But we mustn't forget what the minister has said. The minister said that he understands, he's working with departmental people. They will not betray the fishery. They will not betray that industry here in Nova Scotia. He's going to go to Ottawa. He's going to work with the federal government, the federal bureaucracy, and try to put a solution in place if there should be a crisis in the lobster fishery. Mr. Speaker, and they will not, this government, the Department of Fisheries, the Loans Department will not cease a fisherman's boat, if that boat in Nova Scotia, while we address this issue, if that person can demonstrate that indeed it was because of the downturn in the fishery. So we wish the lobster people, fishermen, success. We encourage them to keep strong in their lobby. And we're going to do everything as a government. And I, too, as the Minister of Tourism, hope we have a strong economy. And I will support the Minister of Fisheries in his trip to Ottawa, or to lobby the federal minister to help our fishermen. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The honourable member for Cape Breton Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, first of all, let me congratulate the member from Digby Annapolis for bringing this bill forward, or this motion forward. It's timely and worthwhile, and I guess I'm not perceived as someone from a coal mining town as someone that would, and nor do I profess to know a lot about lobster fishing, but the industry is very vibrant in that coastal area, from what's called Region 28, Area 28, and Mr. Speaker, that's an area that stretches from Cape North, which is in the member from Victoria the Lakes riding, around to the ridings with the Cape Breton North and Cape Breton South, Cape Breton Nova, Cape Breton Centre, Glace Bay, and indeed the Speaker from Cape Breton West. So those areas are all involved. And last year, the catches were relatively good in those areas. But the reality of fishing is many times that when you have an abundance of the commodity, the price is driven down because of the abundance. So what happens is there's a leveling off, and fishermen understand this, and they hope that they'll balance. But historically, the price of lobster hasn't really moved with the overall other aspects of the cost of doing that business, whether it's purchasing equipment, whether it's fuel, whether it's your other labor costs, such as your hands and so on. Mr. Speaker, those are cost factors that have not been increasing. But yet, in the area I explained, and I'm sure that the minister knows this area very well, because his assistant deputy minister, his family is from that area, Mr. Roach. He's from that area. He knows this all too personal. Maybe he's not too good at building bait shacks, but nonetheless he knows the area. That's a little snipe at the minister, and he understands it. And I don't think he takes any real affront to it. We both know what we're talking about. But in the area, Mr. Speaker, that area, by and large, employs 500 directly, and it's an industry that's worth between $10 and $15 million. But the importance in this debate at this time is they traditionally, that area, their price flow out of what's being paid this time of year. Now, as the Minister of Tourism said, and I have to agree with him, that to survive in this industry, you have to be really bright, and you have to know how your business operates. So what they know is they will see the prices early on in the area around Southwest Nova and all that. You'll see a spike, which is really the Christmas buying season. Now, if you weren't bright like a lot of these fishermen, you say, oh, this is what we can expect next year. This is the price where it'll be fluctuating when we set our traps in April, May, June, and July. Well, Mr. Speaker, that's not the case here. The case is they realize that that's a spike, and then it falls, and then it averages out. And matter of fact, when it comes time for their product to hit market, it's usually lower. Now, again, last year, if you take it, that group in that fishery in particular had a hard time, because that's when our Canadian dollar was stronger, and their exports to the United States, while they were still, the markets were still fairly good in the United States, you had a problem with the overall currency. So there was a harder exchange there, Mr. Speaker. They would buy and sell in American dollars, and therefore it meant a smaller return for many of these fishermen, Mr. Speaker. So we've got a problem coming up here that has to be addressed in the fullness of the discussion. The discussion really has to say, not a trip to Ottawa to talk to, as has been said by the members on the government side, to talk to the minister and the bureaucrats. These problems are resolved with long-term planning. Long-term planning around marketing, around looking for new and expanding existing markets, Mr. Speaker, that for us to say it's business as usual and hope that we will, that the people in the fishery will ride out this storm, and what we'll find that we'll get through this year, but the 2010 season will be better. Well, we can't depend on that. What we have to do is look at this in long term and then say, where are our new markets? I heard the minister talk about going to Japan, but these plans, it cannot be just thought through or talked to from a nation-to-nation perspective. Mr. Speaker, what has to be done is that I don't think there's any other commodity-based industry like the fishery where these folks, you're in real danger when you exclude the actual people that go out and catch in this fishery, when you remove them from this actual negotiation side of the equation. So we need to look at those and say, well, what do we want to do here? Do we want to do a year by year and hope every year that we'll get lucky and it'll be a good year, and then tell them, well, maybe next year it won't be so lucky. But we have to have something. We've heard many people talk about, whether it's a plan to rescue other industries, whether it's auto, and we see what happened in the financial sector in the United States. And I don't think we need a drastic plan like that to help make this industry better. I don't want to use the term save this industry, because the people that have been doing this for generations will make sure that this industry survives. But what we got to do is make sure that it survives in local small communities, that these local independent fishery people are not knocked out of that industry because of ITQs and the like, Mr. Speaker. What we need to do is to take that industry and say, look, this is an industry that supported rural Nova Scotia for years. And again, the members across the way have said what that meant to local rural communities and what they would buy in the local rural communities. So it's very important that when we work on a plan, and I'm agreeing with the minister and those for is, yes, go to Ottawa, but it can't be a one-off. It has to be a larger picture, because, Mr. Speaker, if there is, and I think we all believe, there is a fabric to rural Nova Scotia, and clearly this is part of a major piece of our rural fabric, is our fishing industry. We are, as our license plates say, Canada's ocean playground. And I don't think we want to see that industry harmed by way of getting our local community-minded people out of that business. We don't want to see it corporatized. What we want to do is keep it in the hands, as it has been for centuries. The lobster license has been handed down from one member of the family to the next. We want that identity. We want that identity in rural Nova Scotia. And so what we need, yes, a good start is the trip to Ottawa. But, Mr. Speaker, what we really need is to make sure that the voices of rural Nova Scotia, the fisheries, my friend here from Shelburne County, my friend from Digby Annapolis, and indeed my friend, the Minister of Fisheries, that everybody has to work together to let's make this work. Let's make sure this is an issue that will resolve itself and help grow rural Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, we need to protect rural Nova Scotia. Ottawa will not protect rural Nova Scotia. International financiers will not protect rural Nova Scotia. The people that have to protect our way of life in rural Nova Scotia, our fishing industry, our agriculture industry, are the people in this House. We have to do that. We have to do it today. Minister, I urge you, make that trip to Ottawa. Take your counterparts. Do it now. Don't do it later. And tell them what we want, what we'll accept, and we'll accept nothing less than the survival of rural Nova Scotia. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Time has expired for debate with the emergency debate before the House this afternoon. We will now return to private members' public bills for second reading. We will continue with the honourable member from Cape Breton South. Member from Cape Breton South.